Cue cards. You see them everywhere. Classroom presentations, boardroom presentations, executive meetings, and the list goes on. We see cue cards on a regular basis in our presentations, whether it's us using them or seeing other people use them, because of this general advice that we tend to give on public speaking around these pesky little pieces of paper, which is the following. Well, I mean, if you're, not bringing your entire speech in full in front of the classroom or in front of the presentation room, then I guess it's okay to use cue cards. Just make sure to only use bullet points. And it's for this reason that we see them in almost every presentation. And it's for also this reason that in this week's episode of MasterTalk, I'm going to give you 3 reasons why we should never use cue cards in any of our presentations. Hi everyone, I hope you're having a fantastic week. Brendan from MasterTalk here, your go-to channel to mastering your talk. And on this week's episode, we're covering the importance of never using cue cards. The only exception to this rule that I will give you is if you're an absolute beginner and you're very scared to be on stage, then by all means use them. But if you ever want to be really good someday, or just intermediate, you should never ever use them. So let's use this video to explain why. Number 1. The barrier. Cue cards act as a barrier between yourself, the presenter, and the audience. Here's an easy example to demonstrate this. Let's say you're talking about your life experiences in a presentation to your audience, and there's 3 key messages that you want to deliver to them. And you have forgotten 1 or 2 of them. If you have cue cards, your first instinct will be to do this. Point number 1. Point number 2. Which drives my point. If you use cue cards and your instinct, even if you just look at them once, or even if you just have them, it creates a barrier between yourself and the audience, and you lose that emotional touch and connection that you want your audience to feel about your presentation. The second reason is it sends the wrong message within that tip. So what I mean here is that message is how you say something is more important than what you say. So how you say something is more important than what you say, which is absolutely true, by the way. But with cue cards, what you generally do is you're generally afraid that you want to make sure you get all your points across, or else your audience won't like you and you won't connect with your audience. That's not true. It's a lot worse to have cue cards and get all your points across than get half your points across and being super connected with your audience. Another easy way of explaining this is it's like a dance recital. Like, dance teachers always tell their students this after months of practicing for like a show or a recital. They say, even if you mess up the dance, pretend as if you didn't and just get back up. Let's say you fall. You get back up and you keep dancing. And the reason is because, well, your audience doesn't know the dance routine. Similar in public speaking. The audience doesn't know what you're going to say in this presentation. So if you happen to miss 1 or 2 things out of like so many points, A, your audience won't even know, and B, if you make it show with your cue cards or by looking nervous, then it just ruins your presentation. So my point is obvious here and pretty straightforward. Remove the barrier that is cue cards and you'll be able to connect that much more with your audience. Number 2, the next thing I want to teach you is that cue cards unlearn the right things that I'm teaching you in this channel. And let's use that tip through the lens of my most popular video, which is 5 basic public speaking tips in 5 minutes. So there's 3 things I want to go over in that video. The first one is we learned that the biggest difference between exceptional speakers and average speakers is their use of silences and how they leverage silences to deliver exceptional presentations. And what I want to drive here specifically is if you use cue cards, you are not using silences effectively to really enhance your presentations. Because whenever you're pausing, you're not pausing for effect. You're pausing to look at the cue card. So let's say you're presenting, you forget something, you do this. And this is my point. My point is simple here. Without cue cards, you're going to be able to use silences as a way to drive your points forward and to enhance your presentation. But using cue cards nullifies this effect altogether. It ruins the effect altogether, I would say. And you can't use silences as a leverage for you to get better at presentations. The next thing is eye contact, right? There's two things and two places where you should be looking. Either your audience or your slides. Audience or your slides. If you look in any other direction, you lose the emotional connection that you have with your audience. But let's say by looking at your cue cards, right? Another example is if I did my entire YouTube video by looking at cue cards. It'd be really boring, right? You could just read my script. Why listen to me? Same analogy here. By introducing cue cards, you create an artificial distraction for yourself that you otherwise wouldn't have needed or had in the first place, right? And the next thing I want to go over within my 5 basic tips here is the most important one. Your audience. Remember, the quality of your presentation lives and dies based on how much your audience falls in love with you. And the way that they fall in love with you is by staying connected with you. And if you have that cue card, or those cue cards, many cards, they'll act as a distraction to make yourself successful. The last thing I want to go over is probably the most obvious one and the most important one, is you don't need them because there's other ways you can leverage those same types of tools in a way that it doesn't affect the way your audience perceives you as. In other words, what I'm trying to say here is there's other support tools that you can use that are way better than cue cards that doesn't show your audience that you're taking a pause because you don't know what you're saying. And PowerPoint is the best example of this. If I forget something and I have cue cards, I'll look at the cue card and my audience will know that I don't know what my next point is. But if I use PowerPoint, and my old friend gave me this tip, and I don't know what I want to say next, what I do instead, without cue cards, is I walk up to the slide, right? And I look at the slide and I say, okay, and this is the next point I wanted to drive. But I point at the slide, right? I look at the slide and I point at it. So when I do this, when my audience looks at me, they think, Brendan knows what he's saying. He's just pointing something to a slide to emphasize a point, right? So I intentionally use PowerPoints to keep my connection with the audience. Obviously, don't overuse PowerPoints either, but it's way better doing that, pointing at the slide and maintaining your eye contact with your audience or your slides than creating this artificial barrier with cue cards. All's to say, everyone, is cue cards are everywhere. Classroom presentations, boardroom presentations, executive meetings. And my goal with this video is to teach you one key point, which is the following. You will only be an exceptional speaker if you never use cue cards. I fundamentally believe in this idea because it is way better for you to communicate something that matters and how you say that message and how you communicate it by saying less than saying everything with cue cards. As long as you never forget that, you'll be able to master your talk. As always, if you enjoyed this week's episode of MasterTalk, smash that like button and subscribe to the YouTube channel as well. And I'll leave you off with this. If you know someone that uses cue cards, and I know you do, be sure to send them this video so that they'll be one step closer to mastering their talk. Take care, everyone. Have a fantastic week, and I'll see you next time on MT.